everybody, it's Romania Black, and we're on episode 2 of The Great Pretender. And the last episode was really great. It was a lot of fun. I went back and rewatched it in the English dub, and I'm a little bit torn. I think I want to stick to the Japanese sub only because, well, one, Junichi as playing Laurent, but also because now that we've established that they are going to be speaking, we know it is Japanese, but we also know that in the actual episode it may be English. I like in episode 1 that they make it they do a really clever thing where they're trying to be realistic and showing Laurent and Ed interacting with one another in their own native languages, but then the barrier is, very almost distracting. So at one point while they're in the traffic line in LA, they're like, okay, we're just gonna drop all pretenses and have these characters speak in Japanese for the audience for their sake. And I went back and watched the English dub, and I did put a few notes down because there was one thing that I didn't notice upon redoing the discussion that I'm sure by now y'all have commented at the end of the Zareth about, but the English dub, I really like that what they do with the English dub is that the actor that plays Laurent, which is Aaron Phillips in the English dub, he starts out with a very French accent and does this French accent because you come to find out that Laurent is French. And then he does a pretty good one. I thought his French accent was pretty good. But then Alan Lee plays Ed, and he actually knows Japanese. And so he speaks in Japanese and then does the accent. Because when he was speaking Japanese, I was like, is this the English dub actor doing Japanese? It is. And then I was like, oh, that's cool. And he kind of does the fake accent. And so it works really well when they're in the traffic jam and Laurent's like, your Japanese accent's really bad. And it's an American that knows Japanese doing a Japanese accent. And he's like, and then and so then when they say for the sake of everything, they're going to do the rest of the episode in English, they actually go to their actual speaking voices. So Alan Lee says everything in his just regular accent and saying in English, and then Aaron Phillips says it in English without the French accent. So it actually works really, really well that everything's translated to English, and so it actually is very good. You can kind of they both drop the accents and they talk in their regular voice for the audience sake, but we're supposed to suspend disbelief and believe they're still talking in French English or, Japanese English. So I thought that was really cool. I thought that was a very clever thing for the show to do. I'm going to stick with the sub for now, but I do think I'm going to go back and rewatch the episode, kind of like what I do with Death Note. With Death Note, I would watch the episode in the Japanese sub and then go back and watch it in the English dub over again before watching the next episode. I think I'm going to do that with this series. One, because I want to hear what the English dub sounds like, because so far it's pretty good. But also because it's helped me catch on to some things that I didn't even notice when we went back in the discussion. For example, rewatching this episode this morning, Laurent, when he first gets in the cab and Ed chases him down in Japan and hops with him right before they go to LA, Laurent literally grabs the candy tin, takes a piece of candy out and pops it in his mouth and is just eating it. And you don't think anything about it, but then when they do the drug deal and it's supposed to be passed off as a drug, I'm like, wait a minute. And then it's just all. So what this series has told me in rewatching the first episode for the third time is that I'm going to need to pay attention in this show to get all the little minute details. So that makes me feel really excited because last episode, it was just such a big twist that the whole thing was a con to get Ed involved in Laurent's scheme to trick the Hollywood director that he needed the Japanese scientist, and Ed was the best con man in Japan, so we got that. So that part was fun and has told me I need to go back and pay more attention. But also, rewatching some of the gestures and stuff that Laurent makes, Laurent eyes Ed quite a bit, just gives him that side eye, looking him up and down, oh, you're the best con man in Japan, huh? There could be something there. I don't know. Laurent strikes me as a character that would be totally just whatever sexual. Laurent's whatever I got, I'll take. He doesn't just strike me as gay. He strikes me as he could be, bisexual, pansexual, whatnot. So that's fun. That's fun. I'm all about it. But yeah, I do like what the English dub did. But I think I'm going to stick with the Japanese sub for now. I started with it. I want to kind of stick with it. But I will go back and rewatch in the English dub. So if people are like, oh, you should watch the English dub, I'm going to be doing that after each episode before I move on to the new one. Kind of like what I did with Death Note. And I'll tell you all about it. So I thought that was really clever. But yeah, this series, I love the Freddie Mercury ED. I love that it has just modern music and it's very aware of what time period it is, which, you know, it's kind of a catch-22 sort of thing, that when an anime or any series for that matter acknowledges the time that it's created in, it does instantly date it to an extent. The thing that works to The Great Pretender's benefit is that this came out in 2020, so it's still fairly new. It doesn't feel dated yet, right? Now, 10 years down the road, it will feel a little bit more dated, I feel, because like with what Mogi tells him in the very beginning, he's like, oh, you're a 90s kid. Well, in 2020, that makes sense. It kind of like we can connect with that, but you know, 10, 20 years from now, somebody looking back on it may not get the same feeling out of that they would watching it now. So it's kind of like, it's a pros and cons. It makes it kind of cool and fresh now. It will instantly date it later, but that's all right. Again, like Death Note, oddly enough, that series is kind of dated with its time frame too. So what can we do, right? What can we do? But I'm really excited, y'all, to dive into this second episode and see what we get. So we're going to start The Great Pretender episode 2, and we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's do this. Yeah, I figure Whiteboard-kun needs to come out. And I am going to put on my UV glare glasses for this one to help my eyes out. But yeah, so my dorky Whiteboard-kun scientist glasses. But yeah, this episode's really good. Really good. And not just really good, but establishing a lot with our characters so far. Establishing stuff with Abbie, stuff with Laurent, and stuff with Edamura. Like, establishing things about their characters that I'm like, okay. Okay, well, what we playing at? So, I had to bring Whiteboard-kun out because I wanted to kind of break this down. I feel like, especially with the last episode, by the time I'd watched it the third time, I was like, I'm missing things that I feel like Whiteboard-kun will help me to break down a little bit. So, with that being said, as Whiteboard-kun like leans towards me, we have Edamura. We have him that Laurent keeps calling Edamame, which is kind of fun. And then we have Laurent. Old Laurent. He has a name in here. We'll get back to there. And then we have Abbie. And we have their 3 con artists, right? That all have seemingly different ambitions, different reasons for doing things. But God, this episode was great. This episode giving context to why Edamura does the things that he does, right? The Los Angeles case 1-2. I love the graphic of him just swinging with his glasses. I feel like, yeah, these are my Edamura scientist glasses that I'm gonna put on there because, yeah, he's conning everybody. Like, I love it, right? We instantly go back to the mom and him in the hospital with her and the whole thing with the cats. And we know this is at least over 3 years ago when he saw his mom in the hospital. So we instantly know that he has the connection. He has the connection with his mom who likes cats, and he keeps the cat figure, the figurine. He has 2 figurines on him that he keeps. He keeps the one of the cat and then the one of the king. And we'll get that name again here in a little bit. But he keeps that on him. And what they represent are 2 different things. And I think that's really interesting. And of course, Huckleberry's like, while you're here, throw this ball. But yeah, so he says that it's a sales job. He's like, the company imports and sells tea. He's like, it's small, but the CEO is nice. And he's like, drink, it's healthy. So we talk about how innocent he was at the start of this. That Edamura, he did start out as innocent, right? Because he believed with his sales job I don't know why I call Kudo Mogi. I think I was still in like Death Note vibes from the intro. But yeah, so we have Kudo, who is the CEO, right? Of this tea company. And he, this young, impetuous, handsome guy. I mean, it's kind of like pharmaceutical sales. One of my coworkers used to be in pharmaceutical sales, and she's like in her late 30s now, but she did it when she was in her early 20s, and she's super pretty. But she was like, she fit in the US, the stereotypical pharmaceutical salesperson is like blonde, young, and like really thin, and she fits all three of those. She's a very pretty woman. But she's like, I just kind of got tired of doing it, and when I started getting older, she's like, I just felt like I needed a job change. So Edamura kind of fits that to a T. He's young, he's handsome, and he's very, impetuous and innocent seeming. So he doesn't seem like a con man, right? That innocence makes him seem very genuine, right? And so he kind of is at the very beginning of this because he gives his mom the tea. If he knew the tea was fraudulent and not doing its job, he wouldn't have offered his mom, who's very sick, the tea. So he starts out innocent with this sales job and believes he is doing quote unquote good. Believes that he's doing good. He's like, I'm doing right, Mom. I got myself a job. It's, a small job, but it's something. And then she drinks it and she's like, oh, this is awful. And she's like, ugh. And she starts to like choke on it. And he's like, oh, I knew it. He said, everyone says their tongue burns when they drink it. It's like, the Mankai tea. And she's like, I'm glad really that you've gotten this job. Because of your father, you've had such a heavy handicap. So we establish his dad. His dad sounds like he was a criminal, is what it sounds like. And so we get a little bit of the connection here that the mystery surrounding Edamura that we can label up here is his dad. We're assuming he's a criminal, right? That's what we're led to believe. Obviously, I don't want any spoilers yet, but it seems like his dad is involved in some type of criminal activity, and he's like, and it's become a handicap for him getting a job. He's like, well, it's fine. I got a job despite that. And the mom's like, Makoto, like, you're finally able to get a job. Like, don't give up even if it gets hard. She's like, it seems like his dad being a criminal has really set him back from being able to get any prospects locally, probably because his dad has a reputation. And so his mom's like, you finally got a job. It's okay. Just don't give up even if it gets hard. Like, you worked really, and I like that mentality that his mom instilled in him. His mom instilled in him this idea of keep going even if it's hard, which is something that he ends up taking with him into the thing with Laurent. Like, he's about to give up and go back home because this mafia job with the mafia seems really hard and dangerous. And he's about to be like, peace out, you have fun with that. But then he has the cat figurine, he thinks of his mom's words, being like, you've got yourself a job. Even if it gets hard, don't give up. And at this point, he's realized that he can't go back with Kudo and them because that was all a big fraud to begin with. So he doesn't have a warrant out for his arrest, so he technically could go back, but he decides to stick with the job with Laurent. And then he's like, oh, okay. He's like, I got it. Yeah, sure. And then he's like, and you need to get better. And so he gives her the toy, and it's the little cat toy. And he's like, you like cats, right? And she's like, you can bring me more if you want. I love that her eyes are her eyes are the color of his hair. They're like a dimmer brown, and his eyes are a more vibrant brown. And so he goes back to the main store. And so at first I was like, oh, Kudo's trying to con you with the tea. But then we find out that it's all part of it. That he ends up, the whole thing with Kudo talking him down on the price was that it was so overpriced to begin with. Kudo talks him down from 5,000 yen to 3,500 to sell the product. And because Edamura seems so innocent, everybody kind of buys into it. They're like, oh yeah. They're like, oh, this kid, he's so innocent. Of course we'll buy him. He thinks that he's got talked down so much on the price. We'll just take advantage of it. When in reality, that was it from the start. And they're like, yeah. And so they sell this product, and what's funny is that we establish later that the cops in the moment, they're the same cops. The cops are the same guys that were working for Kudo in the tea company, right? They were all in on the gig. But again, when you panic and you're in like this situation of fear, you oftentimes don't realize what's going on. So Ed in his panic did not put two and two together and recognize the guys from the tea company. Plus, that was 3 years ago. That was over 3 years ago. Like, if you worked in the company for a month, would you really 3 years later, especially after incarceration, remember who those guys were? Probably not. But it's funny that Kudo got them back together for the con, right? That's interesting. And he's like, yo, now he's like, it's a bit expensive, so the customers need a little push. And so, like, the way Kudo frames it, of course, Edamura wouldn't be like, oh, this is a fraudulent company. No, he just thinks it's like any other, like, multi-level marketing thing where you're just trying to sell it, right? And he says, I'm actually thankful for someone like me. Like, so Ed has constantly been plagued by whatever his dad's past has done, being like, I'm the son of a thief or the son of a criminal. Can I, someone like me? And Kudo's like, oh, don't say things like that. He's like, no. He says, you and your dad are different people. So a lot of people know about his dad. Okay. A lot of people know about Edamura's dad. All right. So his dad is well known. Or at least has a reputation. But Kudo says, you're not him. And it's like, well, is the apple falling far from the tree, though? Because he ends up becoming a con man. So, but I feel like Edamura, well, we'll talk about this. He does it by choice, but then again, what choice does he have? Some people out there are some people who aren't prejudiced like that. And then, like, just when we have this heartfelt, heartwarming moment, he's like, this world is filled with people like that, so you need to be tougher. Like, because, again, so that goes alongside too. Keep going even if it's hard. Then we have Kudo's advice that says that people are in the world that are going to be hard on you, so you've got to become tougher. Like, you just have to be tougher than they are. That's survival of the fittest. We'll talk about lone wolves later. But he's like, you just got to be tougher in it. You're too well behaved. It's like, you're too innocent. And so then these guys come in, like, you have this heartwarming moment. And I thought for a second that maybe the guys coming in were part of, like, a con. But no, they literally come in to bust them, talking about their products are fraudulent and use false information. Like, they get busted. We have an arrest warrant. Who's in charge? And Kudo's like, oh, well, and he even knows the guy. He knows Mr. Wada. He's like, oh, it's you again, Kudo. So this is not Kudo's first time being put on trial for this. He's been busted before. Oh my gosh. And Edamura just has, like, he just freaks out because he's like, he's like, can you go easy on that young guy there? And they're like, no way. And I love the art style of this series because, like, when they have him under the interrogation lamp, like, the art style, the way that the lights and everything look, it's really, really cool. It's very stylistic. He's like, the company works with fraud and you really didn't notice. And I want to get a picture of that. Poor Edamura. He's just like, no, he was so innocent. He's like, I really did not realize that that's what was going on. He's like, I didn't know anything. I thought the company was normal. Like, he had put all of his hopes in it. And the guy's like, just admit it already. He's like, I don't want to say this, but the neighborhood was gossiping and saying, like, father, like son. Like, that sucks so much. Because it's like Edamura was literally trying to have a fresh start and not be put in the same category as his dad. He was trying so hard, and of course, being a salesman, it's just a few steps away, right? From being, because a salesman is kind of like a con man in a way. You are kind of a con man in the world of sales. I've dabbled in it a little bit, and you are selling something, and you have to present it the best way possible, and you kind of have to hide the flaws of things. You don't have to outright lie about it, because that is fraud. But when you're selling something, you do kind of mask the good over the bad, right? This isn't a sales gig, but when I worked in an animal shelter, we had, like, little pieces of paper that talked about the animals that were to be adopted. And the vets and the people that ran it, we didn't write this out. I just volunteered there. But they found very clever ways to mask the truths about certain animals. Like, they would be like, they'd be like, a one dog only family. And it's like, no, it doesn't get along with other dogs. It will attack them to pieces if you put them with other dogs. So we don't need a family that has other animals. Or they'd be like, oh, well, this cat has a very independent spirit. And you'd be like, this cat is cray cray, is what it really translated to. But, you know, that was selling it, to sell it to getting adopted. And there is a little bit of like a white lie in there. A little bit you're just masking things with pretty language. And that's kind of salesman life. And it's not too far from being a con man. It's a couple steps away. So yeah, but it sucks because Edamura was not like that. He was trying to go about this the right way, and the world just didn't give him a chance. And Edamura was afraid of that. He was afraid of being linked to his father, and they find him guilty. So they sentenced him to 18 months in jail, right? They sentenced him to 18 months in prison. So just a little over a year of being in prison, like a year and a half, and a 3-year suspended sentence. So 3 years suspended. Okay. So the suspended sentence, that part I'm a little bit unsure of because I, again, am not involved with it. It says a suspended sentence is an alternative to imprisonment where a judge may partially or entirely suspend the convicted individual's prison or jail sentence as long as they can fulfill certain conditions. Oh, okay. So a suspended sentence typically means a conviction will remain on their criminal record. Oh, okay. So he technically didn't, it combines jail time and probation. Okay, they can be sentenced, what does it say here? I'm like trying to find out law things. It sounds, the thought of going to prison may seem scary, but what does it say? They may offer a suspended sentence to anyone convicted of a minor nonviolent offense where the defendant does not pose a risk of danger to the community. They'll be eligible for a suspended sentence. It allows the defendant to stay employed or attend school and may reduce the risk of recidivism. Okay. So they have to comply with the terms of probation. It's usually 1 to 5 years. Okay, so basically they told him that if you can stay out of trouble for 3 years, you don't have to go to jail for 18 months. Okay, so that's pretty much what they told him. Was that you have the 3-year suspended sentence. And he told her that he was fine. He's like, the undeniable truth is that I'm innocent. And of course now she's laying down, so she's not feeling, any better. And she says, life doesn't end from 1 or 2 mistakes. You have time. He's like, yeah. She's like, the world isn't very understanding sometimes. Truth is, nobody really knows. She has that cat toy. And she's like, all you can do is believe in yourself. So she, again, the mom saying that you just have to believe in yourself. And sometimes the world isn't going to get you, but that's okay. So basically, as long as he could just stay out of trouble for 3 years, it's fine. He's not going to go to jail. Okay. And he says, but I'll always believe in you. Aww. And so that's really sweet. So he goes to try to find a job. But this is the thing. And it's true whether it's Japan, whether it's the US. It is often really hard to find a job when you have a criminal record. Even if it's something that, like in Edamura's case, is a non-violent crime. Like his crime was that basically they were selling tea to people that thought it was going to cure them of something and it wasn't. Yeah, that's not good, but it's not the end of the world. It's that was you see all sorts of the multi-level marketing stuff all the time. It's oh, this product will reduce wrinkles on your face, or it'll cure your bunions, and it will absolutely not. But people don't go to jail for that. It's it's kind of sucks because he really didn't do anything terrible, not worthy of not getting a job, right? And the fact that there's that criminal record alongside the reputation of his family, it prevents him from getting jobs everywhere he goes to because people don't want to trust him and they don't want to be tied up in it, especially in the world of sales or a corporate office, right? And he says it's a misunderstanding. He's like, the company I worked for committed fraud. And he's like, well, you were caught though, right? And he's like, yes. He's like, you need to accept the truth first to get anywhere in life. And then, yeah. That just sucks. Nobody gives him a chance. What our company values is honesty, and fraud is hard to accept. And nobody will give him a job anywhere. And we see that, like, the time changes and he isn't able to find work. And then his mom passes. It's so freaking sad. Like, it's so sad. The first thing we see with them, and it's his mom passing. And he's just there in the cold. And it's just so dim and desolate. And he has a little cat. And the cat is, like, dingy from where she's, like, held it for so long and worn on it. Really, it, like, hits you hard. And all I can do is hold on to it like the one keepsake of hers. And then that's when he decides to become a swindler. He's like, nobody's going to give me a chance. So I'm going to do the only thing that I apparently am good at, right? So he decides to become a con man. So obviously his dad is out of the picture. So the question is if his dad's still in prison, or if his dad has died, or if his dad just is like totally disconnected from the family because of his lifestyle. We don't know about that. And I don't want any spoilers. I'm sure if this show is going to show us, it's going to show us. But yeah, then he runs into Kudo, and Kudo had just got off probation. So I'm assuming that maybe 3 years have passed. We don't know for sure how long it's been from the probation. And Kudo is kind of like, oh yeah, I'm sorry. He like meets him there. He's like, congratulations on your parole. He's like, you wanted to talk. He's like, don't try to do anything violent. I love the light just flickering. He's like, everyone's calling me a swindler. And Kudo's like, the Kudo has this look on his face like, kid, I don't know what to tell you. You were just the wrong place at the wrong time. And he's like, so I might as well. He's like, shall we team up? And that's how we got here. So he's like, if people are going to call me a swindler, then I might as well become one. And we'll just start our own gig. And of course, Kudo's done it for so long, he's probably like, all right. But then they wake him up. I love it. And so we go back to the present. And I love Abbie's character. Abbie's just like, whatever, let's go. And the colors of this entire series so far, they're so saturated and vibrant. But like when his mom dies, it's so muted and gray. Like the colors just, they represent so well, like just the mood of everything. It's really, really well done. I love it. But they go to this hotel or this restaurant, right? And he bumps the person. Like he goes out of his way to bump him though. If you go and rewatch, like if you rewatch, he goes out of his way to bump the guy. And it's like, I'm so sorry. I'll pay to have it cleaned up. And he's like, oh no, it's fine. Don't worry. It's like, okay. Which is funny. It is funny at the end that he gives the bill to the one guy. Because I'm like, you're the one that made him spill the wine. And yet you're asking him to pay for your meal? Okay. But I like that Laurent tells him later, he's like, we don't pay for the innocents. We'll touch back base on that. Man, that lobster looks amazing. I'm not crazy about lobster. I like a good lobster bisque if I'm feeling fancy, but I don't really eat a lot of lobster. It's pricey and it's not, I don't live on the East or West Coast, so it's not readily available. So if you want a lobster, like a surf and turf where I live, it's a little bit more pricey. But yeah, that does look really, really good. And so Laurent says that he started this rumor a few years ago about this new synthetic drug made by a Japanese researcher. And I like that Edamura is just not eating. He's just like, whatever. I'm not going to talk to you. Abbie, meanwhile, is like, nope, give me the food. Where I like that Abbie's just like chowing down on all of this. And Laurent is carefully like being very refined, right? So Abbie just takes what she gets. Takes what she gets. Does not complain. It's all fine. And Laurent is very refined. But Laurent also plays the long game. He is a long game player, as we come to find out. Because this was years ago that he started this rumor. Years ago. He's like, we used that rumor to make a profit. Yeah, millions of dollars. And he's just like, you're not eating your food. Like when he looks over, he's like, oh, not a fan of lobster? I love that Abbie's like, I'm gonna take it then. Like she just chows down. He's like, make sure you chew, Abbie. And she's like, fine, whatever. Leave me alone. And he's like, I swallowed. And I like that still thought the drug was real. And we established this. He's like, you made me swallow that no drug because of you. And he's like, drugs were the only things I didn't want to touch. So we established this, that drugs that Ed wants none of. I'm going to be guessing that that's tied to his dad. His dad might be tied to drugs, right? And maybe that's why his dad's tied to drugs, and that's why Edamura wants no part of it, because he's like, I do not want to be totally like my father. So he's like, I didn't want to touch drugs. That's the only thing I don't want to have anything to do with. He's like, it's all over for me now. And then Laurent's like, oh, well, you know, it's fine. You mean this? He's like, it's really effective, right? And he's like, what's so funny about it? And so then it's like, no, he was panicking. He's like, is it orange or grape? He's like, no, it's strawberry. He's like, there's no way Sakura magic exists. He's like, the powder on the fountain pen was potato starch. And the one who spread the rumor was also myself. Playing the long game. Playing the long game and being resourceful. Which, I'm sorry, but swindling the mob out of $10 million at this point, or even $5 million like it was, that's a bold move, Cotton. That's a bold move. What happens when they find out you lied? You're going to have to leave the country and never come back to LA. What? Like, sir, excuse me, sir. That's a big, bold move there. He's like, then what about you? And she's an actress, so she's like, yeah. She just acts crazy for a second, and she's like, no, everything's fine. It was an act. And he's like, yeah. And then at that point, he's like, well, damn it, give me the lobster. He's like, if it was all an act from the start. So Abbie is good at acting. So Abbie, she knows karate moves, at least the crane stance, and she's an actress. Also very brash. I like Abbie's character a lot. She's very no-nonsense, like, screw you guys, I'm doing what I want, sort of thing. He's like, I thought you were acting too. And she's like, to think you were actually panicking. He's like, what a cute swindler. So, yeah, Laurent is not shy. He's not shy about his possible affection towards Edamura. It's definitely an infatuation. He's kind of infatuated with Edamura. He's like, what a cute little swindler you are. You've caught my fancy, right? And he's like, why did you use me? And he's like, well, we had to bring somebody that was Japanese to pull off that it was Sakura magic. And I had trouble since I didn't know any good swindlers in Japan. So Laurent's like, I just kind of went to Japan and saw who could I find that would fit the part. And then Kudo and the one woman that we'll get her name in a minute, they kind of tipped me off that you would at least play the part and would work. And Abbie, maybe it's not racist, but Abbie was like, oh, we could have used that guy from Miami from our time in Miami. So her and Laurent have been to Miami. They have frequented Miami before, right? So they've worked together there. And she's like, was his name Jan or Yo? And he says, that guy was Taiwanese. That's not going to work. And she says they look the same. And I'm like, oh, girl. But Laurent's like, no, would not have been convincing. He had to be Japanese. He's like, you were the best swindler that the scout found. He's like, what scout? And then he remembers the woman. And he says, oh, you've noticed the hint? You noticed the watches? And said her name, his skills are decent. He's a bit young, but he looks like he could be a researcher. And it says, she owned Kim, formerly known as Dynamite Body. I love that she's like an older con artist that used to be really, really hot. And she wants to stay in the game, but she's clearly not. She can't seduce men anymore with her art of seduction. I love it. She says, you want me to get him with my sexual abilities? It's great. He's like, she still wants to be active. And he's like, could it be that Kudo... And he's like, oh, Kudo was easy to win over. He's like, that merry fellow, we just had a couple drinks, and he was easy to get. And he's like, the cops were all in it, too. He's like, the detectives that chased you were also former members of his company. And then Edamura starts piecing it together. He's like, damn it. He's like, ah. And so he's like, the taxi cab driver, and Laurent's like, oh, no, that was different. He's like, the taxi cab driver had nothing to do with it. That just worked out in our favor. He's like, but there's no warrant for your arrest, so we don't have to worry. He's like, we're fine. Everything's cool. He's like, why did you do things in such a roundabout way? He's like, why did we do this way, though? He's like, this seems like a lot of trouble when you could have just asked me outright to help you. But honestly, I don't know if he had asked Edamura outright if he would have actually helped. I don't think he would have. I think he would have been like, and not have been a part of it, right? And he says, it's faster to drag you into everything. And what's more, it's hard to resist training an honest and innocent boy who pretends to be bad. So, Laurent believes that Ed is innocent, but wants to train him to be a con man. I'm like, Laurent, you may have your work cut out for you because Ed may give you a lot harder time and maybe more bold than you anticipate. But Laurent believes he's an innocent boy. He's like, oh, he's innocent, right? Mm-hmm. And Edamura's like, how dare you? He's like, of course, I know everything about you. And I like that Abbie cuts him off. He's like, including why you became a swindler. And that's when Abbie's like, let's stop there. The mafia's doggies are searching the area. I like that Abbie conveniently, for the plot's sake, is like, hey, we're going to save that for another conversation later in the season, but we need to stop now because the mafia is actually looking for us. And yeah, and it is the actual mafia. I'm like, oh my God. And so then he says that guy over there will cover our pay. And he's like, sorry if it's a big bill. And that guy's like, oh, it's no problem. I'm like, then why are you having him pay you for your food? You're the one that bumped into him. And Laurent's just like, And this line here, when he goes back and whispers to him, he's like, I don't want to be treated by you. I was like, ugh, the way he whispers it, and the way he says it so quietly, I was like, I'm like, Laurent, you are playing into Laurent's hands. Laurent seems like he likes this sort of thing, and you were just like tantalizing him. I'm like, sir, did you see the way he played with that clutch last episode? You are playing into his hands, sir. He's like, okay. And then he ends up taking it. So we get some backstory about the mafia, and we get about Cassano, who is like nominated for a Golden Raspberry, which is a Razzie for the Razzie series. I like that he says you should really watch the Razzie series, though. It is really good. But so we get this idea here, putting his movies aside, his breath and intellect are the worst, meaning that he's smart and disgusting, which is oftentimes the worst combination, right? And his real work is in the drug industry, and he basically functions around 3 gangs. I'm like, this guy doesn't seem like somebody you just con for funsies. He seems like he's like the real deal and would probably get you killed, and they established that. I'm like, he combined 3 gangs. I'm like, yeah, no. And Salazar, who used to be his boss, was one of those gang leaders. I'm like, no. Also, most of Hollywood's drugs come from Cassano. We cut like to the stereotypical camper in the Western desert, right? With the lounge chairs and the women tanning. When I first started this series, they had an MA warning about nudity. It is valid, very much so. And there's like the women on the drugs, the young ones who get close to him, all stray from the right path. If they're unlucky, they lose their lives. If they come to the West Coast in hopes of pursuing their dreams, and they become junkies and sex slaves. Well, it's not like we've had any actual movie directors who have been using women and, involved in maybe tax evasion or stuff like that, or seedy underbelly activities. We've not had anything like that in real life, so what fantasy and fiction? Right? But I do like, what I like about this too is that the series is very tasteful in the fact that Abbie is presented in a positive light. Like in the last episode, she is a little bit sexualized in her character, but that's because we're seeing it from Cassano's view, who only views her as an object. And here, even the parts where she like is down in her skivvies, it's presented in a very tasteful way. Like, they don't objectify Abbie or like sexualize her like we see some of the women that Cassano views of in this episode. And I like that. I like that Abbie gets a little bit more agency and she kind of uses her sexuality to her advantage as a con artist. I like that a lot. I like how her character is presented in this series so far. It's nice. I appreciate it. What an awful American dream. Yeah, acting is not exactly a career you go for in the US unless, you know, you got luck on your side and you're very, very talented. And he says, with the looks of an old man and the lower body of a stallion. Ugh, gross. Has a very Hugh Hefner vibe. Yep. And then, of course, Salazar's like, well, damn it, he gets all the ladies. What the hell? How dare they? And then, of course, he has the whole thing about the tax evasion. He's the Al Capone. He's like Al Capone in the Prohibition era. And they say that if he finds a traitor, then they're dead. So, yeah, you see, they're making Cassano up to be a very, very serious threat that they are just taking on for funsies. I'm like, which I say for funsies, $5 million is not anything to snuff at. And again, I love when they go to the hotel and there's the yellows and blues of the piano. Like, the art style in this series is gorgeous. I absolutely love it. Like, it does not come across as a cheap anime at all. Like, you know, if it's you, sometimes when it's anime original, you're like, how is this style going to be? No, this comes across very beautiful. It's just, you can clearly see they've taken the time to craft this. Laurent Theory. Speaking of Spy Family, it almost seems like it sounds like a Lloyd Forger, Laurent Theory. It's like, it has the first part of thief and the last part of theory. So it's it's funny. He's like, he's a broker. He's like, I prefer trader. I'm a trader. And he talks about, he says, okay, Laurent, I know a guy looking for a product. So here's the one thing that could save them. The one thing that could save them in all of this is that it doesn't seem like Cassano himself wants the product. He's working for a guy. He's the middleman between Laurent and a guy. Now the question is there actually another guy, or is it Cassano that wants the product? Was Cassano just trying to lead him on? Because if the other guy gets tricked out of $10 million from Cassano, then Cassano will probably still get the $10 million. It'll be the other guy that's upset. But if not, then that's going to hold trouble, right? And he's like, it seems he'll buy for a hefty sum. And he winks at him like, I feel like Cassano is going to try to sell the product that he gets off of Laurent to this other guy for an even bigger sum and profit himself. And maybe that's the deal, but yeah, Laurent's like, I hear it's called Sakura Magic. We're scamming money out of villains who took the bait. Yep, that's a big scam. And they toast their whiskey on the rocks, right? Interesting, right? And I like that Edamura's like, no, not at all. It's not interesting. Nope. You can't cheat somebody out of millions with ordinary candy. Yeah, Edamura's like, how are you pulling this off? Like, that doesn't seem feasible at all. And he's like, why? He's like, an adult wouldn't get caught in that. He's like, listen, Edamame. And I like it doesn't correct him this time. Humans don't always believe the truth in front of them. It's all just a game of illusions. They believe what they want to be, what they want to believe. Especially if it's convenient. In exchange for people's outrageous hopes and dreams, we're selling them an illusion. Which is not too different than just a regular old salesman. It's just this is to a much higher extent. Right? A much higher degree. Correct? That's our job. And he's like, you're getting killed for sure. Yeah. But Laurent doesn't seem deterred. He's like, everyone dies eventually. He's like, we're just going to live this high, right? The thrill of it. And so I like that Edamura, he questions their fates. But Laurent seems very much like he just lives for the thrill. He lives for the thrill of it. Like, he's not too concerned, which if you're a high stakes guy like this, yeah, that's going to come up quite a bit. And I feel like Edamura, knowing that his mother's passed and everything, knowing that, yeah, that sense of mortality probably feels a little bit different to him than most people. And he's like, you're the one who proposed the bet. Laurent's like, and I sold for $5 million. So in other words, I won. And you're my henchman. And Edamura just doesn't say anything, and Abbie just kind of looks off. He's like, you can rest here for the night. I love this, though, when he's like, oh, that's right. He's like, and the dinner bill from earlier, I ended up paying it because we don't swindle. We're swindling villains, despite how we look, not the innocent. And so he leaves. I loved it. And I love that he says, Abbie, you should cuddle him. And Abbie just like flips him off the whole time, like, no, thank you. So there is the question, though, of, you know, is Abbie, is she into women or just not Edamura? I'd say it could be either. She might just not be into Edamura. She might be like, you know, a sane person that's not going to try to sleep with somebody the first 24 hours they've known them. But she could be into women. Who knows? But yeah, Laurent leaves. And I almost wondered if Laurent was testing whether Edamura was really into Abbie or not by leaving her with him. But we see him in the bedroom and he's just sitting there looking at the cat toy. Like, okay, what do I do? And like he's looking at it, right? And we as the audience question whether he's going to just leave and what he's going to do about it. But the thing of it is, and we see that everything's set out and he looks like he's getting ready to go. And Abbie like stops him. She's just like, nope. And like knocks him down and like gets him in like a crab hold. And she's like, are you running, you trash? And she's like, how dare you think you're Japan's top swindler? He's like, you guys call yourselves con artists. You're acting like warriors of justice. And she says he says there's no such thing as justice in this world because he's lived it. So yeah, for Edamura, he believes there's no such thing as justice. He's like, no. He's like, if there had been justice, I would have gotten a job. If there was justice, my mom wouldn't have died. If there was justice, A, B, and C would have happened, but that's not how the world works. So he's like, justice is just put on. It's not real. And he believes his experience tells him that. And she's like, well, living in Japan makes you take peace for granted. He's like, I need to live a cunning life for that peace. And then he gives her the medal back that he stole. And she's like, ugh. She's like, don't touch other people's stuff. Like he was gonna take her stuff from her too. Or he took it from her pocket in that moment so that he could get out of the chokehold. She's like, I don't know why Laurent took in a novice like you. And then she says, he says he didn't ask you. So he's like, oh, did Laurent not ask you first before taking me in? And she responds with his ideas and lower body always control his actions. So Laurent, he thinks with his ideals and his dick. So what we're saying is Laurent, I could see Laurent being bisexual. I could see Laurent being like into both the ladies and the guys very easily. He seems like that type. But yeah, she's like, yeah, his lower body controls all his actions. He just thinks in the moment. I wonder if he tried to like, if he is bisexual or pansexual, if he tried to like get Abbie to be on his cause and she's like, I'm gonna help you, but not into the dudes, you know? And he was just like, oh, okay. And want to be a con artist with me anyway? And she's like, sure. But she says it's bothersome. And he's like, aren't you Laurent? And Edamura thought that she was Laurent's partner. Aren't you her partner? She's like, we're not partners. We're all lone wolves. She's like, we're not dating. No. She's like, no, small boy. She says that we're all lone wolves. She's like, everyone is out for themselves. She's like, we may end up in a pack, but everybody's out for themselves. Like, no. There's no nakama here. No. One mistake and you're gone. You can only trust yourself. That's this world's only truth. And she looks so terrifying when she tells him. She's like, don't think that we're all going to band together and sing Kumbaya. She's like, I'm helping Laurent because it's good for me, but you only trust yourself. And I feel like her telling him this is what he decides to later. And it goes back to that word that his mom told him believe in yourself. She's like, all you can do is trust yourself. And that ties back to what his mom told him. Believe in yourself. That is the truth of this world. You can't rely upon anybody else to give you anything. And then she tells him to leave. Go jerk off in your nest, you virgin. I love that. He's like, oh. He's like, I'm not a virgin. And she's like, okay, sure. I love that that's what he takes from it. And she's like, they're probably keeping watch at the airport, just so you know. She's like, the mafia is probably waiting on somebody to try to leave, so you might not want to do that. And she's like, he's so innocent. Maybe not. I feel like Edamura is innocent, but there's a twinge of the crazy underneath, right? He's just been hiding it very well. And we see him walking along the road there. I thought somebody was going to stop and pick him up, honestly. I thought when we see the cars that somebody was going to pick him up, but it was actually him going into his pocket. And instead of picking out the cat, he picks up the figurine of the samurai, the shogun, who was the farmer that turned into a king, and saying, like, we're going to become the best in Japan. And then it all kind of hits together, right? It all hits together that he's like, I need to get tougher. I have to believe in myself, and I've got to keep going. So he's like, am I really going to leave Laurent and let this go, or am I going to one-up him? And he decides to one-up him instead. And so, yeah. And so, again, I like the tastefulness of the show. We clearly, the show has not been afraid to show us nudity, but in the scenes earlier, it was like basically of the women that were depraved and like high on drugs. And here, tastefully, we get a nice sexy shot of Abbie's calves, and that's the most we get. These people in their French presses, though. And then she like comes in and he's like, oh, good morning. Do you want some? And she's like, no. And he's already got the champagne out. He's like, did you let him go? He's like, but I gave you two alone time together. She's like, I could have strangled him to death, but I didn't. He's like, there it is. It would have been possible for that virgin anyway. And Laurent's like, a virgin? What? Okay, I see. He just seems like, oh, okay. He's like, I'll also go down, so think of a new plan. He's like, no. He's like, he says he'll be back by noon. He's like, people have talents that they're born with. No one can defy the star called destiny. So Laurent is fully believing that him and Ed, it's destiny. That they're together. He's like, no, this boy's got talent. He'll come back. He'll be back by noon. The funny thing is, he was just not at the apartment. He did come back, just not to the apartment that they were at, whether they desire to or not. And he's like, Edamame will return by noon. And then he doesn't. He's like, well, I guess we're going to go back to Cassano then and just work out a new plan. And they basically go back there and are talking about how they're like, well, we're sorry we couldn't get him to come back. We even asked Abbie to try to convince him, but he got scared. And Cassano's like, what are you talking about? He's like, he's here. He's at the pool. He's playing with the girls in the water. And they're like, wait, what? And then there he is. He's like, there's him with the girls. And the brat raised the price. He raised it. He's like, he wanted double. 10 million. Laurent's like, wait, what are we doing? He's like, that's an outrageous price. Nobody would agree to that. And then Cassano's like, I decided to pay it. He's like, I contacted the safekeeper, so it should reach you soon. I'm like, 10 million is a lot. Now you're playing with fire, right? Now you're playing with fire. He's like, an exclusive contract, right? He's like, oh, of course. And Laurent's like, Abbie's like, what is happening? And he's like, I don't know. So then they go to him, and he's sitting there just waiting for me. He's like, oh, hey, you took your sweet time to get here. I love this. He's like, wow, you don't look quite so innocent anymore. You look more mature. What is this? And he's like, well, yeah. He's like, a man who sneaked into a big shot's wallet and gained great riches. I love it. Japan has the best con artists in history, too. And he talks about the little figurine there. And he refers to the figurine as being like a con artist as well. And they don't know what it is. And so he's like, no. It's the samurai. It's not Samurai Hiroshi either. He's like, no. It's Toyotomi Hideyoshi. And Laurent's like, I don't know who that is. And Abbie's like, don't care. He's like, to put it simply, he was a farmer who became a king. That's Hideyoshi. And Abbie's like, oh dear God, no. And she looks at Laurent, and Laurent's like, oh. Oh, you're this type of guy. I could go with this. He's like, I won the bet. And I love that close-up of his feet where he's like, now come here, Laurent. Massage my feet. Ah! I love it. I freaking love it. I love it. It's like, ooh! Ooh! And I feel like Laurent's like, okay, sir. The first episode was really good. I liked it. It was like a very quick, fast-paced, like, what are we doing to get you thrown into this world, into Edamura's situation, and be like, what's happening? But this episode sold me. I'm like, okay, yes, I am 100% here for Edamura and Laurent and their shenanigans. I'm 100% here for Abbie and her being like, I'm going to have to deal with these two boobs, aren't I? And then this insane con that's gone from 5 million for candy drops to 10 million. And they got to somehow pull it off. Oh my God. About this whole thing about being a confidence man, being about a con man. Ha! So yeah. I'm really excited. I don't want any spoilers, so please no spoilers. I'm excited to watch this series and see how it unfolds, but I'm also excited to see your comments down below. So in the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back next week with episode 3 of The Great Pretender. Bye.